Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala Sayyidina Rasulillah. I am honored to be one of your presenters today, and I would like to thank you very much for coming, all of you on time. And I would like to thank also the brothers in Rochdale Mosque who invited me to come for the first time to this beautiful place and this blessed mosque. And I'm glad also that the brother started by mentioning wasatiyya. The reciter recited to us an ayah from the Quran that says, وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا. This is how I have made you a nation in the middle, a middle nation. And I don't know if, do you know from which surah is this? Surah Al-Baqarah, exactly. You know, ayah number what? It's exactly in the middle of Surah Al-Baqarah. Surah Al-Baqarah is 286 ayahs. If you divide it by 2, it is the ayah number 143 exactly. It's exactly in the middle. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, I have made you a middle nation. Ummatan wasata. Wasatiyya is the main distinguishing feature of this ummah. And the word wasatiyya can be translated in English to moderation. It can be middle path. It can be also balanced way of life and balanced understanding. So we are a nation in the middle between the extremes in everything. In Aqidah, we do not believe that Jesus is God, like Christians. And we don't believe that he's a liar and an impostor like Jews. We are a nation in the middle. In worship, we don't believe that celibacy is an act of worship or that it is a sign of any righteousness at all. But at the same time, we are not open for all type of sexualities. So we are always a nation in the middle between the extremes. And extremism did not appear after 9/11. Did not appear during the past few years. Extremism appeared directly after the death of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he foretold that extremists will appear. And he described them for us. And he described them as people whom he told the Sahaba, when you see them, you will think that when you see them praying, you will think that you are not praying. You don't pray. They pray much better than you. When you hear them reciting the Quran, you will think that you don't know how to recite the Quran compared to their recitation of the Quran. And actually, it is very dangerous. Extremism is dangerous. The challenge of each and every one of us is to stay always on the middle path. It's very easy to go extreme, by the way, either on the right, to the right or to the left, but it's easy to go extreme. It's the challenge to be always moderate. And one of the words that became very controversial is the word jihad. To the extent that the word jihad became even an allegation used against some people. So there are cases in courts in some countries, like the United States, that someone is taken to court because he was planning to perform jihad. So it's a word that makes people panic. It's a word that scares people. On the other side, there's 1.6 billion people who have no problem choosing the word jihad as a name for their newborn child, even a girl. Here in this country, you can find a 3-year-old girl with blue eyes and rosy cheeks, and you ask her, what's your name, honey? She tells you, my name is Jihad, Ammo. So that's a big problem. There's a big gap between us in the understanding of jihad. A whole ummah loves jihad, a whole ummah is scared from jihad. Either they stop getting scared from jihad, or we stop naming our children jihad. But we should come close to each other then. So I chose to explain to them what is jihad. And we have a lecture about that called Is Islam a Religion of Peace or a Religion of War? That talks about jihad. And this turned into a documentary that was filmed in 7 countries. It's called Jihad on Terrorism. It's on the internet, by the way. The issue is, and the problem is, many scholars avoid speaking about it because they don't want problems. You know, mosques are full of informants, and an informant is not necessarily able to understand what the scholar will say. So the scholar, better than having problems with the government, they avoid to speak about it. And then when the youth find that they are reading a word over 100 times in the Quran, but no one explains it, this is not good. This is dangerous here. So actually, I believe that scholars and du'a and students of knowledge should always speak about these issues and explain it to people. To talk about jihad, we need to talk first about another word that starts with a J also, which is justice. Justice. Justice is the ultimate goal in Islam. The ultimate goal of Sharia is to establish justice. The reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent Prophet Muhammad and the Quran with him is to establish justice. And the reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent Prophet Isa and the Injil with him is to establish justice. Jesus, son of Mary. And the reason why he sent Moses and the Torah is to establish justice. The reason why he sent Ibrahim and the Suhuf Ibrahim, the scrolls of Ibrahim, is to establish justice. How can I, by the way, I like always the question to be at the end. Except one question. You can interrupt me at any time and tell me what's your evidence. What's your dalil? At any time. Just be careful because this, yeah. Be careful. Yeah, good. Good boy. Yalla, go to mommy. You too. Go to mommy. Just be careful, don't touch this cable. Good boy. Yalla, I want to see you after the lecture. Okay? What is my dalil? How can I claim that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent all the prophets and all the messengers and books with them to establish justice from the Quran? Surah Al-Hadid, verse number 25, it says, لقد أرسلنا رسلنا بالبينات والهدى وأنزلنا معهم الكتاب والميزان ليقوم الناس بالقسط. We sent aforetime our messengers with clear signs and sent down with them the book and the balance of knowing right from wrong so that people may stand forth in justice. Allah sent all those messengers and all the books with them to establish justice. It's the ultimate goal. Islam is a religion of justice. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told Prophet Muhammad, surely we have sent down to you the book in truth that you might judge between people by that which Allah has shown you. So be not a pleader for the treacherous and argue not on behalf of those who betray themselves. وَلَا تَكُنْ لِلْخَائِنِينَ خَصِيمًا. You know why this verse was sent to the Prophet ﷺ? For a reason. An incident happened. A Muslim stole something from another Muslim. And then he was afraid to be caught with it. So he went to a Jew. He went to the house of the Jew. And he knocked his door. The Jew opened. He said, can I keep this with you as a trust? The Jew said, you're welcome. He took it. And then it looks like this thing that he stole had flour and it was dripping. So there was a trail of flour that led people to the house of the Jew. So the Jew was caught and was brought to the Prophet ﷺ. What are these paper and pens? For the questions?
Questions, yeah.
No, I want questions to be verbal.
Verbal?
Verbal.
Okay, no problem.
We're not going to choose questions. خلاص? Anyway, so the Jew was brought to the Prophet's house, ﷺ. And he said, I didn't do anything. I didn't steal anything. It is this Muslim young man, whose name is such and such, who brought it to my house. So the Prophet said, bring me this boy. So the family of this A young man came to the Prophet and said, "O Prophet of Allah," he confessed, it's true that he stole it. And he regretted. And actually, he made an oath never to steal again. Please, forgive him. Just let the punishment be on the Jew. He's a Jew. Of course, the Prophet ﷺ would never think about this as an option. Never. And the Quran came telling him, it's not even an option to think about. Surely we have sent to you the book, which is the Quran, in truth. لقد أرسلنا إليك الكتاب بالحق لتحكم بين الناس, not بين المسلمين, so that you may judge between people, not between Muslims, by that which Allah has shown you, which means by justice. So be not a pleader for the treacherous. This Muslim is a treacherous. And argue not on behalf of those who betray themselves. Ultimate justice. This verse, brothers, O you who believe, stand out firmly for justice as witnesses to Allah, even though it be against yourselves or your parents or your relatives. يا أيها الذين آمنوا كونوا قوامين بالقسط شهداء لله ولو على أنفسكم أو الوالدين أو الأقربين. You know, this verse was put on a poster for 2 months in the reception, in the lobby of the law school of Harvard University 2 years ago. For 2 months. You know why? Those kids, the students said, this is the epitome of justice. Who can tell me why? Why American students did that? And why not British students did that? Because in the American Constitution, there is something called the Fifth Amendment, which allows an American citizen to abstain from testifying if his testimony will hurt him or his parents. Of course, this is an obstruction of justice. If you abstain from testifying, or if you lie in your testimony, probably an innocent will be hurt. But because those are the founding fathers who made this constitution, who can change something that John Adams or George Washington have made? So they did something else to get around it called the subpoena. If you receive a subpoena, which means to go and testify in the presence of grand jury, you cannot abstain to go around this, because it's an obstruction of justice actually. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not compromise. You have to testify if you are ever invited to testify. And you always have to say the truth. Even if it will lead to your own harm, or your parents, or your relatives, you have to say the truth. It's a religion of justice. I also always like to speak about, or to mention the story of Khalifa Umar ibn Khattab. At the time of Umar ibn Khattab, there was another companion called Amr ibn al-As, a great companion of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who was the ruler of Egypt. And his son raced against some Christian Egyptians, and one of the Christian Egyptians won the race. So there was a fight, and he beat the boy up. He beat him up, and he told him, how can you win the son of the two noble people? His father, Amr ibn al-As, and his mother are from Quraysh, are Arabs. Who is he, that Copt, to win? So this Copt took his mule and traveled all the way to Medina to file a claim against the son of Amr ibn al-As, the son of the ruler of Egypt, and speak to the Khalifa, Umar ibn Khattab. Umar ibn Khattab brought Amr ibn al-As and his son. And the boy confessed. He said, yeah, actually I lost my temper, and I wronged him, and I beat him up. I'm sorry. No, sorry. He said, yeah. Take this stick. And Umar Khattab told him, beat him up on his bald head. Beat up the son of the two noble people. This is Islam. Like that, we finished speaking about justice. Let's now speak about jihad. Is it a religion of jihad or a religion of peace? Actually, when we speak about jihad, linguistically the word jihad comes from the root of the word jahada. In the Arabic language, jahada means istifragh al-juhd, which means doing extra effort. You can say that linguistically the word jihad means striving and struggling. Idiomatically, the word jihad has three main connotations. It comes in three contexts. There is the spiritual jihad, which is a non-violent struggling within oneself to live a life of virtue. You struggle against your ego to be a better person. Who attended with me the spiritual purification workshop? Okay, that was, okay, only two. That was, we performed spiritual jihad in this workshop. Okay. It's not easy to wake up and pray at 3 o'clock in the morning and wash your face, hands and feet while everybody is in their cozy beds. This needs jihad. It's not easy to spend in charity without telling people and showing off. People always like to be praised. To do that secretly and give people in charity secretly, this needs jihad. This is called spiritual jihad. You struggle against your evil inclinations in order to be a better person. The second concept is verbal jihad. You say the truth, even if it's against your own interests. The Arab Spring was a form of verbal jihad. Those who went out speaking against a tyrant, and then he shot them and they died, for example, in the January 25th revolution, are not martyrs. They are the best of martyrs. According to the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, he said, سيد الشهداء حمزة ورجل قام إلى سلطان جائر فأمره ونهاه فقتله. The best of martyrs is one who was killed by a tyrant for criticizing his tyranny. So the Prophet here is doing what? Is encouraging us to speak against tyranny. He also said, if the time comes that you see my ummah afraid of telling a tyrant that he's a tyrant, then there's no hope for them. Which means that you have to tell tyrants that they are tyrants. What do tyrants do? Tyrants kill. Yeah, you will die anyway. You will die one day. Instead of getting run over by a car, die with dignity. So the Prophet is encouraging Muslims to speak against tyranny, even if this will even cost them their own lives. And the third type of jihad is combative jihad. Combat to establish justice. If people lose their rights, lose their homeland, and they go to the United Nations and file claims and try to return it back peacefully and they cannot, they will fight. And they did. In Paris, in France, they did. And what did they call them? La résistance. See how beautiful the word is? La résistance. But when Palestinians fight for their land, they are called terrorists. Yeah, combat is combat to establish justice, which is a supreme goal, not only in Islamic teachings, but in every civilization. Combat to establish justice is allowed. One of the verses that they use a lot against Islam is this one. Combat in the cause of Allah those who combat against you. They say, see how Muslims are crazy, they have crazy things in their book. Instead of telling them love for the cause of Allah, it says combat in the cause of Allah. Well, continue reading. They just play this dirty game of cut and paste against us all the time. It says combat in the cause of Allah. Those who combat against you. Guys, we fight. Those who fight us. We fight to return back our rights. To remove oppression. And even if we go to fight in the battlefield, the ayah continues saying, and do not transgress your limits, because Allah does not love transgressors. So there are limits. If Muslims go to the battlefield to fight, there are limits. What are the limits? This is what we call the code of jihad. The combat orders of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Prophet Muhammad was a warrior. And I really wonder, how can a Muslim speak about him and not mention that he was a warrior? By the way, those people that you're speaking to are very proud of Richard Lionheart, very proud of George Washington. They have their heroes. We have our hero, Muhammad ibn Abdullah. But he taught us how to fight. The first thing that he taught us is never kill innocent people. Never kill innocent people. In Sharia, we have 90 main rulings. Among them is this ruling, which is لا يقاتل إلا المقاتل. No one can be fought except a combatant. You cannot fight except a combatant. That's a ruling in Sharia. Which means that what happened on 9/11 cannot be justified in Islam. What happened on 7/7 cannot be justified in Islam. What happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki too cannot be justified in Islam. Bombing 67 cities in Germany cannot be justified in Islam in World War II. Bombing London cannot be justified in Islam. Innocent civilians are innocent civilians. That's a red line. Innocent civilians are innocent civilians. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ has a clear hadith that says, لا تقتلوا العسيف. Do not kill civilians. Al-asif means the civilian. Because all those people say, no, it's not good to kill civilians because there are children and women. And what's wrong with men then? Is it okay to kill men? So the Prophet said, civilians, asif. Asif is someone, a man who can be a farmer, who can be a doctor, who can be an engineer, but not a combatant. Just be careful. Okay? He also said never torture prisoners of war. So Muslims are not allowed to torture prisoners of war. Neither physically nor psychologically. Yalla, interrupt me, tell me, what's your evidence? Physically, before the Battle of Badr, a unit from the army of the Muslims, I think Ali ibn Abi Talib was one of them, and I think also Zubair ibn Awam. I don't remember the third one, but they caught two guys from the army of the Kuffar, the army of Quraysh, that were bringing water. So they caught them, and they took them to the camp of the Muslims. Because that was the very first battle, the Muslims really were desperate for any information about the army. They really wanted to know the number of people, the kind of, the number of horses with them, the number of shields. So they started to beat up the two guys from Quraysh to get information from them. And the Prophet was praying. He was troubled by what the companions did, and he ended his prayer, and he said, you beat them up, they lied to you. And he brought the guys. He said, you have to answer the questions. They don't want to answer. They are patriotic. They don't want to say any information about their army. So the Prophet said, it's a very simple question. How many camels do you slaughter every day? So they looked at each other. Huh? Is this the question? Yeah, why not? Tell him. Sometimes 9 camels, some days 10 camels. So the Prophet looked at the Sahaba and he said, the crowd is between 900 and 1,000, because every camel feeds about 100. This is how an investigator should be. But information that are brought by torture are not reliable. And this is known by the police. When you torture someone and you get information from it, you cannot really rely on this information. People lie to end the torture sometimes. People can even admit doing things that they didn't do just to stop the torture. Not even psychologically, people can torture prisoners of war. What's the evidence? After one of the battles, Bilal was walking with some prisoners of war from a route where they saw their dead. So they broke down and cried. And the Prophet blamed him, told him, don't you have mercy in your heart, Bilal? Why didn't you take another route? Why do you take a route where they can see their dead? Those are prisoners of war. We have an Islamic way of torturing prisoners. How do Muslims torture prisoners? How did the Prophet torture his prisoners? You know how? He used to jail them in the mosque. Every time Muslims are coming to pray, they give them some milk, dates. Those who were tortured like that were never seen in any battle after that against the Muslims. It was really torturing, actually. We came to fight those people who are now kind to us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, if you really want to go to paradise and be qualified to go to paradise, وَيُطْعِمُونَ الطَّعَامَ عَلَى حُبِّهِ مِسْكِينًا وَيَتِيمًا وَأَسِيرًا. If you want to qualify to go to paradise, feed. Miskinan, a poor person, yatiman, or an orphan, or a POW, a prisoner of war. A prisoner of war who came just a day before to kill you and rape the women and take the land, but now he's vulnerable. Yes, be kind to him. It's not easy. This needs spiritual jihad, actually. This is your religion. We've seen them when they took prisoners of war and what they did. You remember the photos of Abu Ghraib? Huh? You remember the photos of the Iraqi jail? This is not allowed in Islam. The Prophet ﷺ said, never kill animals. We're not allowed also to destroy crops. Well, I've seen this actually also instruction, which is never disturb the birds in their nests. And I said, no, come on, this is too much. I didn't really understand what it means, because actually that's one of the instructions of Abu Bakr to the army of Zayd. What does it mean, not to even disturb birds in their nests? And then I understood this when I read about the Crusades. Especially the first crusade. Anyway, if you lose the signal at any time, it's these kids. Okay? Anyway, especially the first crusade. In the first crusade, 1 million men marched from Europe. I think from Spain, Germany, and France. Marched from these three countries to Jerusalem, but not by the sea. They marched through Europe. You should read in the history books what they did in Christian countries, in Romania, in Bulgaria, raping women, looting, plundering, putting cities ablaze. And then I read this, never disturb birds in their nests. I understand. You are a disciplined army marching to establish justice. You cannot be tyrants yourselves. Never destroy infrastructure. Of course, the Prophet ﷺ never said infrastructures, but we're not allowed to poison wells, and poisoning a well is a destruction for the infrastructure. We don't torture prisoners of war, but we may torture tourists today. Okay? So we don't poison wells. Never mutilate bodies of enemies, dead or alive. After the Battle of Badr, Umar ibn Khattab came to the Prophet and said, "O Prophet of Allah, good news." He said, "What?" He said, "Guess who's among the captives in Badr?" He said, "Who?" He said, "Suhail ibn Amr." Yes, mashallah, very good. Suhail ibn Amr is the biggest propagandist. He says, he used to say speeches that motivate the tribes to fight the Muslims. And Umar said, "O Prophet of Allah, let's get rid of him." The Prophet said, "No, I don't kill prisoners of war." "Yeah, I know, but just not any prisoner of war. This is Suhail ibn Amr himself." The Prophet said, "I'm not going to kill him." So he said, "Okay, I have a good idea." Well, I listened to the idea of Umar. I thought that it's not really a bad idea. He said, "Okay, we're not going to kill him. We will just break his two incisors, those two teeth, so that when he speaks funny. He will say Islam, Muslim, and then people will laugh, and they will not really, he will not be as eloquent as before." And the Prophet said, "No, Umar, I'm not going to mutilate a body, or Allah will mutilate my body, even if I'm a prophet." After 10 years, the Prophet died, and all of Arabia apostated from Islam, except for 3 cities. One of them is Mecca, because of a speech given by this man that made all people stand fast and stay as Muslims. Houses of worship. Actually, houses of worship are one of the grounds of jihad. One of the reasons Muslims go to jihad is to protect houses of worship from being demolished, including churches, synagogues, and monasteries. This is according to the ayah, a verse in the Quran that says, وَلَوْلَا دَفْعُ اللَّهِ النَّاسَ بَعْضَهُمْ بِبَعْضٍ لَهُدِّمَتْ صَوَامِعُ وَبِيَعٌ وَصَلَوَاتٌ وَمَسَاجِدُ يُذْكَرُ فِيهَا اسْمُ اللَّهِ كَثِيرًا. Had not Allah allowed some people to push other people, jihad, combat, many monasteries, churches, synagogues, and mosques could have been destroyed. And the women and the elderly, all those should be protected from any harm. And guess what? Always bury the dead with respect. So if the enemy fled the battlefield, bury the dead of the enemy. Don't leave the dead of the enemy for the hyena or to be eaten by the eagles. No. It's your responsibility to bury the dead of the enemy. And guess what? That was 1400 years before the Geneva Convention. Go to www.un.org, the website of the United Nations. Download the Geneva Convention. If you find anything more than this, I'll give every one of you £100. And I know what I'm saying. You will not find anything more than that. What is the intention in jihad then? Intention in war is to kill the enemy. But that's not the intention in jihad. The intention in jihad is to establish justice. If justice can be established without fighting, you're not allowed to fight. The verse is crystal clear in the Quran. So if they withdraw from you and fight not against you and offer you peace, then Allah has opened no way for you against them. فَإِنِ اعْتَزَلُوكُمْ فَلَمْ يُقَاتِلُوكُمْ وَأَلْقَوْا إِلَيْكُمُ السَّلَمَ فَمَا جَعَلَ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ عَلَيْهِمْ سَبِيلًا. If the enemy withdraws from you and offers you peace and fights not against you, Allah is not allowing you to fight them. Do we fight people because they are non-Muslims? No. Okay, can we fight Muslims? Yes, if they are oppressors. It's about who's oppressed and who's an oppressor. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Hujurat, وَإِن طَائِفَتَانِ مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ اقْتَتَلُوا فَأَصْلِحُوا بَيْنَهُمَا فَإِن بَغَتْ إِحْدَاهُمَا عَلَى الْأُخْرَى فَقَاتِلُوا الَّتِي تَبْغِي حَتَّى تَفِيءَ إِلَى أَمْرِ اللَّهِ. And if two groups among the believers fall to fighting each other, then reconcile between them both. But if one of them still rebels against the other, then fight you all against the one that which rebels. Allah is telling all Muslims to fight a group of believers because they are oppressors. Where are we? Oh. Okay, that was the ayah. Okay? In Surah Al-Hujurat, verse number 9. Okay. I got my school education in a Catholic school. And we had a church in our school, by the way. Muslims were a minority in that school. And I always saw the Christian colleagues asking their church leader about 2 verses in the Bible that sound very contradicting. They say, we are Christians, which one should we apply? The one in the Old Testament, which is called the Mosaic Law, the Law of Moses, which is an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Sharia al-Musawiyah. Or the concept of forgiveness of Jesus Christ, which is in the New Testament. Turn the left cheek to the one who slapped you on the right cheek. And the answer was always this. No, as Christians, we should always apply the concept of forgiveness of Jesus. And the kids used to ask why. Both of them are in the Bible. They say, this is in the New Testament. The New Testament abrogates the Old Testament. And I felt something's wrong with this answer. So when I read the Quran, it explained both concepts for me, telling me that both of them are not contradicting at all. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Shura, وَلَمَنْ انتصر بَعْدَ ظُلْمِهِ فَأُولَٰئِكَ مَا عَلَيْهِمْ مِنْ سَبِيلٍ. And indeed, whosoever takes revenge after he has suffered wrong, against such there is no blame. So there is no blame on the one who decides to apply an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, which exists in the Old Testament and exists in the Quran too. On who's the blame then? Next verse tells you, إنما السبيل على الذين يظلمون الناس بغير حق ويبغون في الأرض. The blame is only against those who oppress men with wrongdoing and insolently transgress beyond bounds through the land. So the blame is on the oppressor. Okay, what does Allah recommend? وَلَمَنْ صَبَرَ وَغَفَرَ إِنَّ ذَلِكَ مِنْ عَزْمِ الْأُمُورِ. But whosoever shows patience and forgiveness, that would truly be recommended by Allah. So Allah allows you to take revenge, but He doesn't force you to forgive. But He tells you, I love to see you forgiving. See, in one hand, you don't have two similar fingers. Why would a religion expect us to be similar? Some can forgive and some not. And even those who can forgive, maybe not every time they can forgive. And maybe sometimes the wound is too deep to forgive. So Allah, Islam is a very practical religion. A law in a country cannot be based on forgiveness. You cannot have the law in this country like that. If you stab someone on the right cheek and he doesn't give you the left cheek, call the police and say he's not giving me the left cheek. You cannot. The law has to be based on an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But according to Islam, the law should give a space for forgiveness and allow the oppressed to forgive if he wants. Okay. Does it mean that Islam does not recommend fighting at any time? No, of course, Islam makes it an obligation to fight sometimes. Let me show you when. But before telling you when, let's first discuss together what is the difference between terrorism and violence. Violence is what two enemies do against each other. Violence between two enemies. But terrorism is violence but not directly against the enemy. Terrorism is violence against weak people to put pressure on the enemy indirectly. Those who killed 500,000 innocent people in Hiroshima and Nagasaki did not really have a problem with them. But they wanted to put pressure on the enemy, which is the Japanese government. So they inflicted violence on weak people, civilians, weak people, unarmed people, to put pressure on the enemy indirectly. Those who killed 3,000 people in the towers did not really have a problem with them. They inflicted violence on weak people, unarmed people, to put pressure on the enemy, but indirectly, the American government. Okay? So terrorism is a subset of violence. Terrorism is violence, but not directly against the enemy. It's against weak people. So weak people suffer from what? Terrorism. Look at this verse, in which Allah is blaming Muslims if they don't fight in this case. وَمَا لَكُمْ لَا تُقَاتِلُونَ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ وَالْمُسْتَضْعَفِينَ مِنَ الرِّجَالِ وَالنِّسَاءِ وَالْوِلْدَانِ. And what is wrong with you that you fight not in the cause of Allah and for those weak, ill-treated and oppressed among men, women and children? What did we say the weak suffer from? Terrorism. So Allah here is telling us, how come you don't fight terrorism? So the word jihad does not equal terrorism. The word jihad equals what? War on terrorism. But the real one, not war for oil, and then claiming to be war on terrorism. So the religion of Islam is a religion of justice. Justice, to conclude this, justice can be reached either through peaceful means or warfare. According to this, according to my presentation, you should always try to establish justice. Muslims should always try to establish justice through peaceful means. If they fail, fighting has been prescribed upon you. They have to go to war. That's it. Islam is a religion of justice. Muslims should always try to establish justice through peaceful means. And Muslims are allowed to go to war if the peaceful means fail. We're not going to change our religion. But if they go to battlefield to fight, there are commands. Never kill innocent people. Never kill the civilians. Never torture prisoners of war, and so on. This is what I call wasatiyah. This is what I call balanced way of life and balanced thinking. But the problem is, we are between two extremes today. An extreme that says, every single non-Muslim should be killed. And there is nothing between us except the sword. And the other one says, no, we should always treat them nicely, even if they occupy our countries, even if they fight us, how come? Both are extremes. Both are very extreme. We have to be in the middle path always. But can't we say that Islam is a religion of peace? Actually, yes, of course it's a religion of peace too. Why? What do you think about a book that has a whole chapter called Al-Fath? The Manifest Victory. The chapter is called The Manifest Victory. And it starts like that. إِنَّا فَتَحْنَا لَكَ فَتْحًا مُبِينًا. Surely we have granted you a manifest victory. In which battle was this victory? In which battle?
Libya.
It wasn't a battle. It was a peace treaty. So a peace treaty was called by the book a manifest victory. What do you think about that book? Is it promoting peace or war? When it calls a manifest victory, when it calls a peace treaty, a manifest victory, it's promoting peace. Also, what are the most beautiful names in the world? What are the most beautiful names? The names of Allah. We have 99 beautiful names of Allah. Among them is As-Salam, peace. What are the nastiest names? According to Prophet Muhammad, war and bitterness. He said those are the most ugly names. Don't use them to name your children. What do you think about a religion that teaches its followers that the best name, the most beautiful name is peace, and the nastiest name is war? Is it promoting peace or war? It's promoting peace. So yes, Islam is also, as a religion of justice, is also a religion of peace. Because also peaceful means should always come as the first option. I think I have to move now to the ISIS part, because how long do I still have?
20 minutes.
Huh?
20 minutes.
20, okay, good. Okay, let me go to the ISIS part. Okay, let's go to ISIS. That's a very long presentation. Well, we'll join ISIS with Al-Qaeda also. Okay. Okay. Of course, I was faced also by, you talk from the Quran and Sunnah, well, also Al-Qaeda theologians and ISIS also talk from the Quran and Sunnah. And actually I have here a picture of someone who was a friend one day. He was a very moderate Muslim one day. Very moderate Muslim. But they took him and they tortured him in Yemen for 1.5 years of continuous torture. And he came out different. He changed a lot. He's Imam Anwar Allah. And he has a video in which he said, yes, we can hijack planes and we can kill innocent civilians in the West. Why? He said for two reasons. Actually, he said several things. One of them, some of them are, if you have to respond, that's a verse in the Quran that says, وَإِنْ عَاقَبْتُمْ فَعَاقِبُوا بِمِثْلِ مَا عُوقِبْتُمْ بِهِ. And if you punish them, let your punishment be proportionate to the wrong that has been done to you. Punish them exactly as they did to you. And he said, and the Americans has a bill of 1 million innocent people just in Iraq. They have to pay it. So according to this verse, and according to this understanding, yes, we can kill their innocents. They killed our innocents. We can kill their innocents too. How can you respond to this? Well, non-Muslims did not only kill our innocents, they also raped our women in Bosnia. Do you think that according to this verse we can rape their women? I debated against some brothers from Al-Qaeda in a European country one day. And they said, no, we don't. I said, why not? If you think that the verse is general, and it tells you that you're allowed to do exactly what they did to you. They say, because this is illegal sex, and I said this is illegal killing too. Actually, this verse equals the verse that we have in the Quran, an eye for an eye, and a tooth for a tooth, and an eye for an eye, and an ear for an ear, and a nose for a nose, and wounds are retribution, one for another, which means that if someone destroys one eye for you, you are not allowed to destroy two eyes for him. Only one eye for one eye. If someone destroys one tooth for you, you cannot destroy his 32 teeth. Only one tooth for one tooth. Do not exceed your limits. But it doesn't. So it tells you about the magnitude of the retaliation, but not the type of the retaliation. Still, if they rape women, you cannot. Because illegal sex is something prohibited for itself. محرم لنفسه. It is something which is prohibited for itself. So it cannot, under any means, be an option. It cannot be an option at all. And killing innocent people is also something prohibited for itself. It cannot by any means be an option. But they do that. Yes, they are not Muslims. They don't have what prohibits them. We have our Quran. We have our religion. And actually, this is one of the mistakes of Bin Laden. There is a video for Bin Laden on the internet saying, if you talk about killing civilians, this is your merchandise and we are returning it back to you. Look what you did in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Bin Laden said so. For the first while, you would like what he said, but excuse me, who are you taking as role model then? Harry Truman or Prophet Muhammad? This is the issue. So don't let the injustice of some people make you swerve from justice. We have our own religion. It doesn't allow us to kill innocent people. If they kill innocent people for us, we are not going to kill innocent people from them. We cannot. This is the issue. Also, he mentioned a hadith which really provoked me a lot. He said, this hadith is narrated by As-Sa'd ibn Juthama. It says, the Prophet passed by me at a place called Al-Abwa or Wadan and was asked whether it was permissible to attack the pagan warriors at night with the probability of exposing their women and children to danger. The Prophet replied, they are from them. He said, see, the Prophet allowed killing children and women. This really provoked me so much, actually. And I have a video that was made answering Anwar al-Haq. And I told him, you see the books behind him, there are some books on the shelves behind him. The book that appeared behind him is Fath al-Bari. And I told him, if you just turn around and take volume number 15, page number so and so, you will see that among the narrators of this hadith is Al-Imam al-Zuhri. And he said, I never narrate this hadith except if I narrate with it another hadith that says, and the Prophet prohibited killing women and children, so that people may not ever understand what Anwar al-Awlaqi was trying to make them understand. This means that in some cases, when war was at night, The Sahaba were troubled next day to find some dead women and children. So they said, what's that? We killed women and children. And they were really troubled. And what they told the Prophet said, they are from them. Which means, as long as you do not target them, they are from them. Who told them to bring the women and the children to the battlefield? It is their mistake to bring them. They are from them. Don't go so hard on yourself because by mistake you killed a woman or a children or a child. But he did not allow targeting them. What the theologians of Al-Qaeda did is they allowed targeting the women and the children of the non-Muslims. So this is a big mistake. Also, he said hijacking is okay. He was actually justifying what Umar al-Faruq did, the Nigerian bomber. He was putting the bomb in his underwear. He said, those people, you see also this is a way to justify killing civilians of Western countries. Those people elected their government. And their government is hostile to Muslims. So we are allowed to kill their people because they elected their government. In my answer to him I said, well, that was a KLM flying from Amsterdam to the United States. So I am expecting 50% to be Dutch, not Americans. Number one. Number two, 50% are Americans. You know, the government won by 51%. In these democratic regimes, people win by 51%, 52% maximum. So this means that out of the 50% of the Americans, 50% of them did not elect this government. So here we are left with 25% of the passengers only. Okay? These 25% of the passengers who elected this government, they did not elect them for the foreign policy. Most Americans don't even know anything about a country called Palestine. They don't even care. They care about the education system, about the health coverage. So many of those 25% who elected the government did not really elect it because they are supporting the foreign policy. So we are left with maybe like 10%, 12%. Remove the children and the children from them who did not vote. What's that? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, أَلَّا تَزِرُ وَزِرَةٌ وِزْرَ أُخْرَى. You cannot, no soul shall bear the burden of another. No soul shall bear the burden of another. You know, this lies in the maybe Christian mindset, which is Adam sinned, okay? So we all have to pay. We were born with the original sin. We don't have something like that. No one will bear the burden of another. So that was totally offensive, and that's why I made these videos for Anwar al-Awlaq. I extend this, okay. I really want to go to ISIS. I have to go to ISIS because actually, 10 minutes, okay, good. That's a big question. Why new Muslims are very vulnerable when it comes to extremism? Many of the extremists are new Muslims. Why? Because of the very dangerous combination of enthusiasm with ignorance. A new Muslim is ignorant about Islam still. And he's also very enthusiastic. So he can be easily attracted to extremism if not quickly educated. We have to quickly educate every new Muslim before he's attracted to towards extremism. To talk about ISIS, I had to go to the internet and download the Bible of ISIS. It is called مسائل من فقه الجهاد, written by an Egyptian sheikh called Abi Abdullah al-Muhajir. It is said that he is detained in Iran since many years, and he was the mufti of the Al-Qaeda in Iraq at the time of Abu Mus'ab al-Zarqawi. This is what is said about him actually. But people don't really know much about him. And the book is called Cases from the Fiqh of Jihad. And the previous name of the book is Fiqh al-Dima', the Fiqh of Blood. So what I have seen is this. Actually, these are my points and points of some brothers who studied this book too, also read it quickly. Among them is Dr. Mu'taz al-Khatib. He's an assistant professor in Qatar and is a knowledgeable person too. First of all, I saw that ISIS do not have rich fiqh. And their scholars are very unskilled and untrained. And I'll show you scandals. I'll show you scandals in this book. When it comes to scholarship, it's a scandal. They have few books which are full of flaws and cut and paste. They just select from the books of fiqh whatever serves their agenda. The books are very misinforming and very misleading. And I call it ISIS fiqh. This is the first page of the book, Masail min Fiqh al-Jihad by Abu Abdullah al-Muhajir. First of all, I saw a lot of ignorance in the ignorance, not of the religion, it's ignorance of the scholarly approach itself. I'll give you two or three examples and that's it. In page number 16, he says, وهذا كله ظاهر في انقسام العالم إلى دارين دار إسلام ودار كفر وحرب واستقرار هذا التقسيم وترسيخه كمعلوم من الدين بالضرورة. The world is divided. Listen to this. The world is divided into an abode of Islam and an abode of kufr, unbelief, and harb and war. So either an abode of Islam or an abode of war. And this categorization is deeply established and is known by necessity in the religion. Do you know what does it mean, known by necessity in religion? Anything which is known by necessity in religion, if you deny it, you are kafir. You are not a Muslim. It is known by necessity that we have to pray 5 times. If you deny praying 5 times as an obligation, then you are not a Muslim, even if you pray. But if you deny it, it is known by necessity that stealing is haram. If you say no, stealing is halal, then you are not a Muslim, because it is something to be known by necessity in the religion. He is saying that knowing that the world is categorized into an abode of Islam and an abode of war is known by necessity in the religion, which means if you deny this, you're a kafir. Okay, to prove this, you have to tell me, what did Allah say this? What did Prophet Muhammad say this? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never said this. Prophet Muhammad never said this. And the word Dar Islam and Dar Harb, abode of Islam and abode of war, was never mentioned in the Quran or in the Sunnah. Here he's saying it is ma'loom min ad-din bil-darura, known by necessity in Islam. How did he prove this? I'll show you this. See the manipulation. He says, وَفِي الْحَدِيثِ, and in the hadith, according to the hadith, إِنَّ اللَّهَ, quotations, فَرَّقَ بين داري الإسلام والكفر فلا يجوز لمسلم أن يساكن الكفار في بلادهم حتى إذا أوقدوا نارا كان منهم بحيث يراها. According to the hadith, Allah has distinguished between the abode of Islam and that of kufr. So a Muslim is not allowed to live with the unbelievers in their countries and has to be as far as he cannot see their fire. Which hadith is this? By saying in the hadith, it means that Prophet Muhammad said so. And the hadith says what? Allah has distinguished between those two abodes. So it's something that is revealed by Allah to Prophet Muhammad and it reached us in the Sunnah. Guess what? This phrase, which is Allah has distinguished by the abode of Islam and that of kufr, so no Muslim is allowed to live with the unbelievers, and that is not anything said by Allah or the Prophet. It is said by an Imam called Al-Khattabi. So he quoted something said by Imam Khattabi, and he put quotations, and he said in the hadith, Allah did this and that. So he's manipulating here, he's deceiving the audience, he's deceiving the readers, giving them the impression that this is something established in the religion, has a consensus on it. Allah says that. Prophet Muhammad says that. It's neither Prophet Muhammad nor Allah. That's an opinion of one of the Imams. That's an opinion of one of the scholars who give him the right to manipulate the religion like that. Unscholarly approach of selective fiqh. What is the definition of Dar al-Islam and Dar al-Harb? 5 more minutes, okay? This is very important, okay? What is the definition of Dar al-Islam and Dar al-Harb? In page number 18 he says, فقال القاضي أبو يعلى الحنبلي رحمه الله كل دار كانت الغلبة فيها لأحكام الكفر دون أحكام الإسلام فيها دار الكفر. Every country which most of the laws are un-Islamic is an abode of kufr. And in turn, abode of war. Every country where the rules, where the laws are un-Islamic is an abode of war. And here he says, no, let this be later, okay? Of course, I want to tell you that Hanafis don't see that. Hanafis have a different opinion. They say it is about security and fear. If Muslims are safe and secure and freely practicing, then it is Dar Islam. Even if the laws are un-Islamic. If Muslims live in a country and they are free to practice and they do not fear, it's an abode of Islam, even if it's an un-Islamic country. Shafi'is and Zahiris say, if the ruler is Muslim, then it is Dar Islam, even if he doesn't rule by Islam. But if the rulers are Muslim, it is considered Dar Islam. Because if not, you're talking about war. You have to fight the people there. Trustworthy scholarship makes it a must to inform people with the different opinions. My problem with him is, he mentioned one opinion as something that has consensus of all scholars. Why? There's a difference of opinions on this. Why didn't he tell people? Scholarly, you have to tell people. According to the Hanbalis, this is the opinion. And there are different opinions on this. But I take the opinions of the Hanbalis. You're allowed to do that. But you're not allowed to tell people that there's a consensus on something and there's no consensus on it. Here, in the same page, he says, فظهر مما سبق من تحديد العلماء لكل من دار الإسلام ودار الكفر أن مناط الحكم هنا هو نوع الأحكام الجارية في الدار, which means, according to what I mentioned, it's about the type of laws that are applied that makes it a dar of Islam or dar of war. No, excuse me, there's no consensus on this. Hanafis have a different opinion. Shafi'is have a different opinion. Zahiris have a different opinion. His opinion is the opinion of the Hanbalis and the Malikis, by the way, but not others. Don't try to influence people and tell them there's a consensus. You see what I told you at the beginning of my presentation? You can always interrupt me and ask me what's your daleel. Because this is the first thing that I learned from my sheikh. Interrupt me always and tell me what is your daleel. And no one is bigger, no one is greater than being told what is your daleel. But people just read these things as if it's Quran. It's not Quran. Should every kafir be killed? Because he says here, those are kuffar and they should be killed. Because kuffar should be killed, non-Muslims should be killed. Non-Muslims should be killed. For them, they believe that non-Muslims should be killed. Here, in page number 25, he says, وقد نص الفقهاء بل ونقلوا الاتفاق على وجوب لا إباحة قصد الكفار بالقتل والقتال في ديارهم وإن لم يتعرضوا بأذى للمسلمين. You know what does that mean? It means there is a consensus between great scholars, great fuqaha, that killing and fighting the kuffar, the non-Muslims, is not just allowed, no, but rather is an obligation, even if they do not do any harm to the Muslims. Is this our religion? Even if they don't do any harm, you know what? And you go to South Africa, where they are very supportive of the Muslims and the Muslim causes and the Palestine and everybody, and you kill them. Why? Because they are non-Muslims. If we are allowed to marry non-Muslims, you kill your wife. She's not Muslim. and the grandparents of your children, because they are non-Muslims, and the uncles of your children, because they are non-Muslims. What kind of theology is this? What kind of mindset is this? He says here, it's a consensus of the scholars. Listen to what the Abu Hanifa said. Here, same thing here. Here also says, there is, in page number 26, there is a consensus between Muslims, that not fighting them is abrogated by what was mentioned to obligate that fight. Because, of course, you find verses in the Quran that talks about dealing peacefully with non-Muslims. He said all of this is abrogated. So for them, it's very easy to deal with any verse that talks about dealing with leniency and peacefulness. He said abrogated. That was a long time ago. That was khalas. At the time of the Prophet, before the Prophet died, it was changed. Here, Hanafis say fighting and killing is in the battlefield. إنما وجب القتل في مقابلة الحراب. Abu Hanifa says fighting and killing is in the battlefield. Even your enemy, if you see him somewhere else but not in the battlefield, you don't kill him here. Because this can cause a battle. Who told you that you are ready for a battle? Who told you that your leader wants a battle now? When Charlie Hebdo happened, I was in France. And I was about to give a khutbah next day. And they asked me, those people insulted the Prophet. I said, they have been insulting him for 12 years actually. Salama ibn al-Aqwa, a great companion of the Prophet, and he was a very strong man. They used to say that he was like, he can like chase an army just alone. Chase a whole army by himself. He was a very strong companion. In Al-Hudaybiyah, he was resting under a tree. And from the other side of the tree came 4 from the enemy, from the Quraysh, from the Kuffar. And they hung their weapons, so they were not armed. And they started to insult the Prophet ﷺ. What did he do? He changed the tree. He could have killed them, by the way. He could have at least beat them up. But he didn't. Why? It's a law and order. Who allowed him to do that? Who told him that we need a battle? The Prophet wants peace here. 23 years. Not one Sahabi went and destroyed one idol in Mecca. No permission is given. It's not chaos. Being Muslim doesn't mean to be chaotic. So Abu Hanifa says, fighting is in the battlefield. Okay? And there is a ruling in Sharia that I told you, لا يقاتل إلا المقاتل. No one can be fought except a combatant. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran, وَقَاتِلُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ الَّذِينَ يُقَاتِلُونَكُمْ. Fight in the cause of Allah those who fight against you. Not every single non-Muslim. And according to the Shafi'is, الجهاد وسيلة لتحقيق المقاصد لا يقصد بذاته. Jihad is a means to reach goals, but not a goal in itself. For ISIS, jihad is a goal in itself. We have to be always fighting all the time, even those who do not harm us. So when you finish fighting all those who harm you, start by peace, then you can move to fight peaceful non-Muslims. What's that? It's actually a book full of manipulation, full of unscholarly approaches of selecting from fiqh. And I would rather maybe stop here and maybe take questions from you, inshallah, after the next speaker, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan and barakallahu fikum.